My name is Samantha McManus. I'm interviewing Kenny Vosholler on March 7, 2017 at the Sparta Public Library in Sparta, Illinois. Where and when were you born?
I was born in a little town in Clinton County, Damonsville, on September 3rd, 1949, Illinois.
Who are your parents and what are their occupations?
My parents were Andy and Lyra Vosholler. They were both farmers. Well, they were both raised on a farm. They farmed. They had a dairy farm, hog farm. They both passed away. But that's what we did.
Who are your siblings?
I got 4 sisters, all younger than me. Jeanette Welton lives in Stillville. Kathy Schaefer lives in Kirkwood, Missouri. Diane Vosholler lives in Austin, Texas. And Roseanne Bierman lives west of Sparta, Illinois.
What were you doing before you entered the service?
Well, I got out of high school about a year before I entered the service, and I stayed on the farm. My father was raising hogs, and I helped him raise hogs for the year.
And which branch of the military did you serve?
I served in the U.S. Navy.
What ship did you serve on?
I served on 3 carriers. I was on the USS Kitty Hawk for 2 months over in Vietnam. I was on the USS America, took a 9-month cruise from Norfolk, Virginia to over there and back, and then I went on the Constellation for 1 month, carrier quals for the next cruise, and then got transferred.
Did you enlist or were you drafted?
I was called for the draft in, September of '68 or early October, and I passed the physicals, so I said I was going to get drafted in December. Or we could choose another branch of service, so I chose to go into the Navy. I took the 120-day delay program, which they offered then, starting whenever, but they called me a couple weeks later and said they had an opening in November, so I went in November and did my 4 years.
Why did you choose that specific branch military?
Well, I guess the reason I chose the Navy was because they were going to draft me in the Army, and Vietnam was going strong, and I don't even hunt. And I definitely didn't want to carry a gun in a jungle and dodge bullets or shoot anybody. That might be a chicken way out of it, but I figured I could serve my country in a different capacity.
What happened when you departed for training camp and during your early days of training?
Well, you missed home. You missed home cooking. You missed seeing your friends, although you got an opportunity to make new friends. And you got changed from getting up when you wanted to getting up when they wanted you to, and being here when they... It was kind of like school, only a little bit worse. There was penalties if you didn't show up. But I don't know, it was okay. It was pretty regimented. I was one of the lucky ones and didn't have to do the daily inspections because they put me on a cleaning crew, and every day I'd go in and clean this one room where we washed our clothes every day, so I didn't have to do the real regimented stuff. But
Do you recall your instructors?
I had, I can't remember his name. We had a drill instructor. He was pretty decent though. He did stuff for us, and I went to a commissary school, cook school, and we had an old guy that was a pretty decent guy there. That was the only 2 instructors I ever had in the service, in the Navy.
Did you receive any specialized training?
I supposedly learned how to cook. Anyhow, I went to cook school for 2 months, and don't necessarily know if I learned everything I needed to know, because the first thing I had to do on a ship after I went to Kitty Hawk over in Sasebo, Japan, was fry eggs, and I had never fried an egg in my life, not through cook school, not at home, because Mom always cooked, and my sisters did, and you know, when you never fried an egg before, it's kind of hard to do without breaking them, or laying the egg on somebody's thumb or finger while they're holding their plate, and hearing words you really didn't want to hear first thing in the morning.
How did you adapt to military life?
And I guess like everybody else does, you put up with it, or it wasn't really a hard chore for me to adapt. I went away to boarding school for 2 years. I went to the seminary to be a priest, and I had to adapt to being away from home then, and it really wasn't too much different than that. You just do whatever you're supposed to do.
Where did you serve?
Where did I serve? I mean, from the time I went in till I got out? Like I went boot camp in Great Lakes for 2 months, in Great Lakes by Chicago. Then I went 2 months to Newport, Rhode Island, to commissary school, cook school. And then I went over to Japan. Kitty Hawk was over at Japan right then in port. I stationed on there for 2 months, excuse me. And then they flew me back, and then I got transferred to Naval Air Station, Lemoore, California, in the squadron there. Stayed there 6, 8 months, and then we went to Fallon, Nevada for a month, or 2 weeks, so the pilots could practice bombing things in the desert so they could hit targets. And then we went back, and then we went on to Carrier for a month so that they could practice landing the plane on the ship, because most of the pilots, this was their first time on a ship. They were just all new and had never landed on a moving ship. So then I went on the Kitty Hawk. I was on the Kitty Hawk over there. I went on the America on a 9-month cruise across the equator, got initiated, turned from a polywog to a shellback, went over there and seen a bunch of different countries. Argentina, Australia, Japan, Philippines, Korea. Came back and went back to California, and then went on another deal to get ready to go out on the Constellation before they transferred me to Great Lakes, where I was a cook in the main galley there for the last year of my Navy career.
If you served abroad, what are some memories you have of that experience?
Well, some memories of going abroad would be, a good memory would be whenever we were going across to go over there, would be when we crossed the equator, which was close to Argentina, Rio de Janeiro. They stopped the ship the day before, and we had a big barbecue and cookout. The next day we got initiated, which was a whole bunch of different things, like they saved all the garbage from all the food garbage that they had from the time they left for the month it took, the 3 weeks. And you had a tube, 3-foot round tube, you had to crawl through, halfway blocked up, just full of the garbage, face down, and you had to go through water. They had fire hoses cut, and wear your pants backwards, crawl around on the non-skid, all kinds of stupid stuff that probably they would probably frown on you if you did it in high school, but with the Navy it's fine. The ending of the day was whenever you went through that last line and it was full of garbage from head to toe, and they took you in a fire hose and they swung you out over the ocean, and they took that 2-inch fire hose and just sprayed you off, and away you went. The biggest bellied guy was King Neptune on the boat. You had some axle grease on his belly, and he'd rub your face in there, and then they'd get grease in your hair, then they'd cut splotches of your hair out. Just all kinds of different fun little things that only the government could think of. And on the ship, I don't know, you worked your 8 or 10 hours, and then you had to find something to do. I happened to be a cook, and we had our own little break room, and I'm sure other people did too, where we played a lot of cards and board games and stuff like that. We, time in port was okay.
What kind of friendships did you form while serving, and with whom?
Nothing that I guess I'm a person that forms friends that are friends, but I don't keep in contact with any of the people that I was on the ship with.
How did you stay in touch with family and friends back home?
Well, you had to write letters, and if you were overseas, you could maybe call them, if you could find a phone and had enough change to call. But at that time, we didn't have credit cards yet, so I don't know. I just write a letter and hope they wrote a letter back. And most of the time they did.
What did you do for recreation or when you were off duty?
Well, like I said, we were lucky. We had our own little eating place as the cooks, and we would have card games going all the time. I mean, we played pinochle and hearts and spades and whatever, and board games or whatever, stuff like that. Go up to the flight deck and look at the water going by. Go up to the hangar deck and see what was going on. Watch the planes land. Hopefully they all stayed on the ship as they landed. It was always a plus. Although the mail plane didn't make it one time. It just didn't catch a cable, and the mail plane drifted off and went down into the water. We lost all our mail.
Where were you when the war ended?
I was home. I was out of the service when the war ended. I don't even know for sure what year Vietnam ended, to tell you the truth, but I was home and driving a semi by then.
When you're in the military and traveling, where was your favorite place to actually go see?
Well, Australia was pretty nice. We got to see more of Japan than anything else. Sasebo, Japan. When I was on the Kitty Hawk, I was on there for 60 days, exactly. 30 days was spent in port in Sasebo. And 30 days was out. I think the ship had problems. That was the first ship I was on. Manila was a nice place to go to. Manila, Philippines. Sydney, Australia was really nice. I know the beer was cold. Extra cold over there. They played a lot of snooker over there. So.
What memories do you have of your cooking experience?
My cooking experience, I told you one of them where I burnt people's fingers, right? Then that's the only day I fried eggs. The next day they made me making scrambled eggs, which we had a 4-foot grill, and they put an inch wall of salt there and pour the eggs out there and scramble them, and I could do that really good. Then we had to make omelets, and after I did that about a week, they said, well, we think we can find a better place for you to go, and they put me in a bake shop. So I worked in a bake shop, and the second ship I was on, I was E5 by then, and they brought out some frozen berries to make pie one night, and they were frozen. So I was supposed to make 375 pies, is what we made for a meal. And the guy told me to go, what do you do with that? You dump them in the water, you go and get the cans so that they slide out, and then you take a saw and you saw it in 4, and you put it in a pie pan. You put your cornstarch and sugar and your stuff on the top, and then you put it in the oven, and it'll be just fine. Well, it may have been just fine when he did it, but for me, it turned into a bunch of juice pies that they throwed off the back of the ship and had me make, I think it was chocolate pudding for dessert that day. That was one a lot of experience. Any more? Any more you want? The Navy did eat good. It seems like what they did on there, the chiefs, the head chief, would have a menu made out that where they would save some money. And the more money they would save, then they could have a special meal. And a special meal was usually steak and lobster. They tried to have that once every quarter or every half a year, depending if they saved enough money to do that, which was kind of special because you didn't get that too much. Because I know people who haven't even eaten lobster yet.
How did you return home?
From overseas? Well, I guess I just came back on the ship. It brought us back, and then we flew to home. And then the last year, when I got out, if you want to know how I got out, I was stationed at Great Lakes for the last year, and I worked what they called the 5 and 2. You'd work 1 week, you would work Wednesday and Thursday, and be off Monday, Tuesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And the other week, you would work Friday, Saturday, Monday, Tuesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So every 2 or 3 days, I would drive back to Southern Illinois. From there, so the last day when I got done, I just drove my car back home and never to return. Although I've been up that way, but I haven't returned to the base.
How were you received by your family and community?
When I returned home, I guess I was probably one of the lucky ones because I wasn't gone a whole long time because I was seeing them all the time anyhow. I'd come home on the weekends, every other weekend. But I know a lot of people that were in the service weren't received. I mean, there was no recognition, which I didn't seem to mind. I mean, it doesn't make me any difference whether you get recognized for doing what you did or not, because I kind of, you're just kind of doing it as part of serving your country. I mean, that's just what people did back then, and it continues. Maybe that's not the way it is as much anymore, but you just serve your country because it was your duty, basically, to help keep freedom for the next generation.
How long did you serve in the Navy?
4 years, from November the 7th, 68 to November the 6th, 1972. The contract is actually for 6 years, I guess. Then the other 2 years are inactive.
How did you readjust to civilian life?
I didn't know if I ever unadjusted. I don't know. I just went on about myself. I took 4 months off and collected unemployment and got my teeth fixed and done whatever the medical they're allowed to do. And then I went and got me a job and been working ever since.
Where did you start working after the military?
I started driving a semi. I actually got hired at a local business here in Sparta, but my uncle had a semi and he wanted me to go along with him to California, so I went out there and started driving a truck and got me a big ticket on the way back because I didn't have a license to drive a truck, and then I felt obligated, so I did that for a bunch of years after that. So.
Have you remained in contact with or reunited with fellow veterans?
None that I was in the service with that I know of, that I've ever seen.
Did you cook for officers, enlisted, or both?
I cooked for enlisted. There was, each meal we served 3,500 rations. There was 5,000 on the ship. But they figured 3,500 people were eating. But the officers and the chiefs would get their desserts from the enlisted people, whatever we happen to have, they would come by that. And on the carry, we make 1,000 loaves of bread a day when we was out at sea, and then they would buy their bread from us, and they would buy their pies from us and different things. And they made some of their own stuff too. But that's who most of us, the stewards cooked for the officers.
Were you on the deck with planes taking off and landing?
You could stand on the side. On the side there was about a 3-foot railing, so you could stand up there and you could watch them land. And hopefully they caught on the cables. There were some cables about yay big that their tail hook would catch on, and then they would slow them down, and then you would have to stand way back. I never did actually go up there when they were shooting any off, but they catapulted them off. I mean, one right after the other on the front end of the ship. But they didn't recommend that you go out there and stand there. That was a pretty intense time. But landing, and there was one plane landed at a time, and it would catch that trail and it unhook and you get it off, and another one. I went up there and watched that a few times.
What was one of your favorite experiences that you went through while in the military?
Favorite experience? Some people would say getting out, but probably wasn't. That wasn't in the military. I don't know, just seeing different parts of the world. You get to travel on the ocean, you get to see different parts of the world, and you're sitting out there when you're in Vietnam, you're 50 miles off the coast, and you see the Russian MiGs fly over. They would announce that Russian MiGs on the port side or starboard side, and you try to run over there and see if you could see them. To me, it was a friendly war, but because I never had any contact with any of the bad. I know one time we lost 3 planes. They flew into a cloud and never came back. Well, we lost 1 plane. There's 3 planes flew into a cloud, and one apparently veered off and never ever came back. Never found him. They stopped the ship and they searched and searched and searched and never found the guy. So they finally just figured out that he defected. That doesn't have anything to do with my experience. Sorry.
Are you a member of any veterans organizations?
No.
What have you done since separating from the military?
Well, I drove a truck for a while, and then when my father passed away, when I was transportation manager for a local company here in Sparta, and then I went and drive some more truck, and then my father died, then I took over the farm, and right now I haul Amish around for a living. Kind of a living, a fun living. Get to see a lot of different places.
How did your service experiences affect your life?
It just made me the way I am now. I don't know if that's good or bad. You'll have to ask my friends that, whether it's good or bad. I don't think it really affected my life. It was just a job I was doing. To me, it was just a job I was doing anyhow. Just go to work every day, get up, go to work, get off, go to bed, get up, go back to work.
What are some life lessons you learned from the military service?
A life lesson. It might not be a life lesson, but, I think in the service they just expect you. What I get out of it, just like any place in life, if you've got a job, you've got to do your job. You can't just say, well, I'm not going to do my job because there's 5,000 other people on this little ship that's only a quarter of a mile long, 260 feet wide. I'm not going to do my job, but you have a job to do, and you just have to do it just like you do in regular, any kind of life, if you want to succeed.
How has your military service impacted your feelings about war and the military in general?
Well, I'm not personally a believer in war, but I guess there's times when there has to be a war. And if that is what the country needs to do whatever, I guess I would not be against war, but I would hope that with everything we have nowadays, that we could always find a peaceful solution to our problems. And I mean, that's just my opinion, that we should not do war. But can't say I'm necessarily a conscientious objector, although
Do you cook a lot today?
well, I make breakfast. I cook a little bit, but I don't cook for too many people myself, and a little bit, but now I don't go out of the way to do that. For a long time I didn't. I just ate out. When I drove a truck, it was always eat out, eat out, eat out. You get tired of that, so, I can cook pretty simple. I can bake. I was more of a baker than a cooker.
Were you in any storms while you're out at sea?
Yeah, they had some pretty good storms. What would it be, typhoons out there, or whatever they call them? I know they had several times, they called it a 16 chain tie down for all the planes. They would take them off the flight deck and move them down to the hangar deck. And they called it a 16 chain tie down. I guess each tire I never ever went down there to see it, but because I was lower than that. And that was when it was pretty rough. You could always tell when the seas were rough in the Navy when you was a cook, because the ship would go from side to side. And can I tell you a little story what we like to do? Whenever we get a new mess cook, which was the new person that came into the service out of boot camp or whatever, and they put them in there, they put them in as a mess cook. The first job they would have would be in the deep sink. The deep sink was maybe 2.5 feet by 2.5 feet. And the ship would rock from side to side, and the water would go up and it would go down. And then we put the guy on that, and he'd watch him. He'd go forward, and he'd go backwards. And he'd go forward, and he'd go backwards. Do that about 4 or 5 times, and all of a sudden he was looking for a place and holding his mouth. And away we went. And then he was not seasick anymore. He done got over it. But that was a cool thing for us cooks in the bake shop to do. I don't know if that's a very good thing, but we all had a good laugh out of it.
What message would you like to leave for future generations who will view or hear this interview?
A message? Well, that if there is another war, and if you are called, and don't be afraid to stand up for your country, to go and I know a lot of people that like the National Guard. Don't be afraid to do that, because there's going to probably be another time when people are called to serve their country and keep this country as the strongest country in the world. So.
Is there anything you feel like we haven't discussed or should be added to this interview?
Yeah, are you going to go into service? Sorry, that's probably not the question I should. Sorry, folks, I didn't mean to put that in there. No, I don't think so.
This concludes our interview. Thank you for taking part in this interview, and thank you for your service.
You're welcome. Thank you for choosing me to do this.
This concludes this interview, unless you have anything else to add about your cooking experiences.
Well, the incident where the pies were all watery, I was told to do that by a fellow cook, and got called in that morning to the chief's office and asked me what kind of crap I made that night, and I told him why I did it, and he said, who told you to do anything so stupid like that? And I told him this other particular person did, and he said, get him up here. So this other guy made 4,000 donuts a night and decorated cakes. So the chief concluded that starting tomorrow morning, you're going to be making donuts and you're going to learn how to cook. And that's how that ended. And from then on, I was making donuts for the last 4.5 months on the ship.
This concludes our interview. Thank you for taking part in this interview, and thank you for your service.
You're welcome.